Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us in this session of Spokane Public Schools Keep Learning Series for Literacy. Today's lesson is for all our fifth graders out there, and any child who's interested is welcome to join us. My name is Mrs. Rich, and I'm a fifth grade teacher at Woodridge Elementary Spokane Schools. I will be your teacher for this lesson. I'm so glad you are participating with me today. This is our first lesson in this series. Today, we'll be learning about how to find main idea using text evidence to support our thinking. For today's lesson, you'll need pencil and paper. I'll give you a moment to get your supplies. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Today's lesson is called How Do We Make Sense of This? So our focus for this lesson is going to be all about main idea. Now, there's lots of different ways you can find main idea. Sometimes it's with the entire text. Sometimes it's just with one chapter or a section of the text you're reading. It can occur with fiction and nonfiction. So my chart over here is explaining the difference between main idea and things we can look at to find main idea, and then details. So details support the main idea, where main idea is what the text is mainly about. When we find main idea, we need to make sure that we get it from various parts of the text, not just one little portion. So if it's even a section, you need to find it from different paragraphs in that section. And then you need 3 or more details to support your thinking. So let's take a look at how do we find main idea. So our essential question is, what is the main idea of this section, bird maps encompasses? So for today, we're not going to look at the entire text for our work together activity. We're just going to look at this one section called bird maps encompasses. So this is what we're going to be looking at. What is that text or section mainly about? What information is in the title and subheadings? So here's our subheadings already that we can see. What do I see in the illustrations or the photographs or the maps or the pictures or diagrams that are included? So I see the main idea in the first and last sentence. Those always give us a clue on what that text is going to be about or what that section is going to be about. And then, are there any words that are used repeatedly? Okay, so those are the things we're going to focus on as we're reading our text today. We'll have 2 different texts, Animals on the Move, and then Blind Facts for Kids. So let's get going. So the first text is called Animals on the Move, and the first section of this text is called Leaving Home. On a warm summer day, a tiny striped fish wiggles out of the gravel of a riverbed in Northern California. For the next few months, this young Pacific salmon, called a fry, explores the section of the river where she was born, feeding on insects and plants. Then instinct, knowledge she was born with, tells her to swim downstream. Tumbling over rocks and through rapids, the salmon finally reaches the mouth of the river where it meets the sea. Salt water and fresh water mix, and the salmon spends a few weeks feeding on small shellfish as she doubles in size, loses her stripes, and turns a shining silver. Then the young salmon travels out to sea, swimming for thousands of miles out into the ocean. In a few years, she will find her way back across the ocean, up the river, to the exact section where she was born. How can she do this? And that's something that's crossed my mind before. You know, when birds travel and animals travel, and they come back to the original places, how do they do that? Animals have 5 senses, just as people do: sight, hearing, touch, taste, and smell. To navigate, they use these senses and other abilities that people don't have, such as echolation, in ways that scientists are still trying to understand. So now we're going to learn about elephants. Elephant talk. Elephants trumpet when they are excited or alarmed. Mother elephants hum to their newborn babies. But people who study elephants have noticed something odd. A herd might be grazing peacefully in the African grasslands. Suddenly, they all lift their heads, flap their ears, and begin to walk together in the same direction. They may walk for miles and then meet another herd. The elephants greet each other with loud trumpeting calls, flapping their ears and twisting their trunks together. It's a gigantic family reunion. But how did they find each other? The elephants didn't see each other. If the wind was not blowing the right way, their sense of smell didn't help them. Scientists were puzzled. Dr. Katie Payne solved the puzzle when she recorded elephant sounds at a slow speed. She listened to the tapes at normal speed and heard elephant sounds no human had ever heard before. They were deep rumbles, too low for our ears to hear, but elephants could hear them from miles away. Scientists call this infrasound. Sound moves in waves through the air. Low sounds like the elephant's rumbles move in long waves that can travel many miles, so elephants rumble back and forth to find each other. I thought was really fascinating. I had no idea how the herds met up. Why bats squeak? Bats also make sounds that humans cannot hear, but these sounds are not rumbles. They are high-pitched squeaks. Bats use these squeaks in their excellent hearing to find their way in the dark. They do so through echolation, using echoes to locate something. If you make a sound in a large empty room, you will hear that sound come back to you as an echo. Echoes are created when sound waves move through the air, hit something, and bounce back. All sounds move in this way, bouncing back if they hit a solid object. But human hearing is not good enough to hear most echoes. It's kind of like dogs. Dogs can hear those really high-pitched sounds. Bats have the same kind of hearing. Bats, however, do not hear these echoes. Bats make their squeaking sounds, or do hear these echoes, sorry. Bats make these squeaking sounds as they fly through the dark in search of food. The squeaks bounce off trees, houses, and other objects. This is useful in finding prey because echoes even bounce off insects. Amazingly, the bouncing echoes tell bats how far away the insect is, which direction it's moving, and how fast it is flying. Bats can even tell how fat and juicy the insect is. Echolation is important to bats because insects are their main source of food. So again, we're having the sense of that sound or the hearing. Why bees sing and dance? Honeybees work together in a hive. Young bees work inside the hive. Older bees go outside to gather pollen and nectar from flowers to make honey. At first, they make dozens of short flights to learn the lay of the land. Next, they learn the direction of the sun appears to move. Finally, they fly as far as 3 miles from their hive to gather pollen. Bees use their sense of smell as well as eyesight to find flowers. They use the sun to find their way home. On cloudy days, they look for landmarks they have learned. Back at the hive, they offer nectar they found to the other bees. Then the bees dance. Sometimes they move in circles. At other times, they zigzag or waggle. So bees are using all their different senses to gather food, figure out where they're going, how to get back. Beekeepers have long known that bees dance, but it wasn't until 1947 that scientists discovered why. When honeybees dance, they are telling the other bees where to find food. Researchers also discovered that the sounds bees make while the dancing gives information about finding flowers. The bees need the whole song and dance routine to learn how to return to the flowers and get nectar too. So I kind of assimilate this to when we are talking. A lot of times when we're talking, like people ask for directions, you'll go, oh, head walk that way, take a left, and we use our hands a lot. But if we didn't speak to them, they would miss part of this. So it's just like humans have to have both the speaking and the pointing part to get our directions through as well. Bird maps and compasses. Now remember, we're going to focus here because we're looking for a main idea. It is easy to get to places you've been too many times before, but traveling a long distance or an unknown route takes more planning. A map and a compass are often helpful for such trips. The map shows you how to get from one place to another. The compass can tell you in what direction you are moving. Every year, hundreds of species of birds take long trips too. They fly hundreds of thousands of miles from one home to another. In the fall, they fly to warmer climates where food is plentiful all winter. When spring comes, they fly back to raise their young where they were born. For a long time, people wondered where the birds went and what routes they took. Researchers now know that migrating birds such as cranes are guided by their own sort of maps and compasses, but it has taken many decades to uncover the secrets of the navigation tools. In the 1800s, scientists started putting bands around birds' legs. The bands contain a name and address. When people found the banded birds, they contacted the person named on the band and told the tracker where and when they had found the bird. In this simple way, scientists learned a lot about where birds traveled, where they stopped, and how fast they moved. Today, scientists still put light aluminum bands on birds' legs. They also use new ways of tracking birds: airplanes, computers, tiny radio transmitters, and satellites. Scientists have answered many questions about how birds navigate. And just think about the science we have today and how that probably has impacted what we know about animals. Some birds migrate in a flock. You've seen Canadian geese fly high in the sky in the form of a V. Young birds follow their parents and learn the route that the older geese have traveled before. They may follow a river and remember what it looks like. Certain sounds or smells will stay in their memory. Also, like captains on sailing ships long ago, birds use the position of the sun and stars as a compass to find their way. Birds and many other animals also use the Earth's magnetic field to navigate. Chemicals in these animals' brains allow them to sense the magnetic field and travel in the right direction. But scientists are still researching how this happens. They think some birds may actually be able to see the Earth's magnetic field. And I think birds are a lot like humans in this way when they talk about the smells and the memories. Sometimes there's a lot of things, as we travel, you'll go by certain bakeries and you'll smell the fresh bread baking and go, oh, okay, I kind of know where we're at. All right, so that's the first text. We're going to take a look at the second one. Okay, our second text is called Blindness Facts for Kids. Blindness is the inability to see anything. Some people are called blind even though they can see a little bit. This is because they cannot see clearly, but only see unfocused shapes or colors, and then that's called legally blind. Some people are colorblind, which means they can see but cannot tell certain colors apart. Surroundings. So remember, we're going to look at each of those headings. Individuals with visual disability not only have to find ways to communicate effectively with people around them, but their environment as well. The blind or visually impaired rely largely on other senses such as hearing, touch, and smell in order to understand their surroundings. So we're going to start with sound. Sound is one of the most important senses that the blind or visually impaired use in order to locate objects in their surroundings. A form of echolation is used similarly to that of a bat. Echolation from a person's perspective is when the person uses sound waves to generate from speech or other forms of noise such as cane tapping, which reflect off of objects and bounce back at the person, giving them a rough idea of where the object is. This does not mean they can depict details based on sound, but rather where objects are in order to interact or avoid them. Increases in atmospheric pressure and humidity increase a person's ability to use sounds to their advantage, as wind or any form of background noise impairs it. And you could imagine if that sense is more keen on things, having that external noise is really going to impact people. So now the sense of touch. Touch is also an important aspect of how the blind or visually impaired people perceive the world. Touch gives immense amount of information in the person's immediate surrounding. Feeling anything with detail gives off information on shape, size, texture, temperature, and many other qualities. Touch also helps with communication. Braille is a form of communication in which people use their fingers to feel elevated bumps on a surface and can understand what is meant to be interpreted. These are some issues and limitations to touch, as not all objects are accessible to feel, which makes it difficult to perceive the actual object. Another limiting factor is that learning process of identifying objects with touch is much slower than identifying objects with sight, and you can imagine how that would be so drastically different. This is due to the fact that objects need to be approached and carefully felt until a rough idea can be constructed in their brain. And finally, the sense of smell. Certain smells can be associated with specific areas and help a person with visual problems to remember a familiar area. This way, there is a better chance of recognizing an area's layout in order to navigate themselves through. The same can be said for people as well. Some people have their own special odor that a person with a more trained sense of smell can pick up. A person with an impairment of their vision can use this to recognize people within their vicinity without them saying a word. And just think about how many people have a certain perfume, or they wash with a shampoo that you're familiar with. And so those are our texts for today. Now we're going to jump in our work together. So before we get started on finding our text evidence, we're going to take a second look at our essential question. What is the main idea of this section, bird maps and compasses? So I remove the excerpts of that specific content, and then I start specific things that would help me get started on determining the main idea. Okay, so the first section I highlighted was the one where it says researchers now know that migrating birds such as cranes are guided by their own sorts of maps and compasses. So that is giving us a clue about, oh, this is going to be a big topic of this section. And notice it is the first section of this particular paragraph. And then I'm going to skip over here, and it says some birds migrate into a flock. You may see Canadian geese fly high in the sky in the form of a V. Young birds follow their parents and learn the route the older geese have traveled before. Oh, so that's the clue. What do? They learn the route. They may follow a river and remember what it looks like. Certain sounds or smells will stay in their memory, so their sight, they're using smell. Also, like captains on a sailing ship long ago, birds used the position of the sun and stars as a compass to find their way. And then finally, birds use the magnetic field to navigate. So those are all the text pieces that I'm going to use. Now we're going to see, how do you put it all together into a paragraph? Okay, so just a few reminders about the paragraph. We want to use part of the question in our answer. The main idea of this section, bird maps and compasses, is birds have built-in compasses that guide them through the routes they learn to follow. Remember, that was the first sentence of that one paragraph. Young birds follow their parents as well as recognize certain smells, sounds, and sights. Remember, we don't want to quote the text specifically. We want to summarize what we have read. Scientists believe that birds even use the position of the sun and the Earth's magnetic field to guide them. And remember, we did not find this in one paragraph alone. It was dotted throughout a couple different paragraphs, which means it covers that whole section, and so we know that these details really support our main idea well. So that's our work together. Let's see what you're going to be working on today. So here's your independent practice for today. Again, you're doing main idea, but you are going to find the main idea of the whole article, Blindness Facts for Kids. So that was the second article that we read. You want to use 3 pieces of text support to support your ideas or prove your thinking. Here's some things to keep in mind. Look at headings. What does the first sentence of each paragraph say? What does the last sentence of each paragraph say? And what is the big overarching idea of the text? Okay, so I look forward to you working independently. Thanks again for joining us today. We'll see you next time.